Hi, do you hear me?
Yes, hello.
There we go. Sorry, I forgot I had put on the push to talk.
You have a good microphone and a pleasant voice. I anticipate a good conversation. Hello.
Thank you. And hello to you too. Can I get a trans rights from you?
No, I fucking hate trans people. We're on NB rights now. Wait, NB or trans? Yeah, trans rights. Sorry,
All
no,
right.
no edgy shit for me today. How you doing?
Personally, sort of okay, but it's been terrible. Just lots of anxiety, sadness. There's lots of anger. Um, right now, I'm in Sydney with my family, with my wife and my cat,
Hmm.
and I'm doing this PhD here at Sydney Uni. And seeing this thing going over in Chile, being far away, but also being with the family, with the social media and so on, and seeing what the media has been doing. So I don't know, how do you want to approach this? Where do you want to start?
Okay, so I generally speaking understand what's going on. So let me in fact okay. Let me give you what I know of the story. I've done no research on this, so I'm really leaving the table up here. I'm leaving it open. So
All right.
essentially, I'm sorry.
So right, I can help out as much as I can.
Yeah, okay. So the narrative that I have heard is that there was an increase in the bus fare that has led to a bunch of protests. But then, what it seems like is that actually the increase in the bus fare was just the last straw, which has followed like dozens and dozens of tiny reforms and concessions and deregulations that have systemically made the life of the average Chilean worse over the past invariable period of time. That you guys have a fairly corrupt, fairly shit tier fucking meanie pants neoliberal government that is systemically squeezing out your rights and economic privileges, and this is just the icing on top. Do I have that more or less?
Yep.
Nice. All right. Tell me what the fuck has been going on over there. Hit me up, and hit me up as though I was complete brainlet. Okay, hit me up as though you were speaking to just some average Amerifat who had no idea what was going on.
All right. So this started on October 18th. I think it was on a Thursday in Chile, and basically, um, we had this price, the fare increase for the metro, which was it was something that was how you say it. It had been planned for a time, but they just tell people, okay, we're gonna increase it in 30 pesos, which is about, I don't know, probably like um, I don't know, like 20 cents or something of a dollar. It's a very low increase, but previously, a few weeks before, or the week before,
Mhm.
the transport minister has said, but people, this is just for the peak time fare increase. If you wanna, not pay so much, you can just get up earlier and go on. And we are talking about a city which is, I have never been to Los Angeles, but I can tell you that Santiago is very geographically extensive. It's a very large city, and also a lot of the people who are working class live in the outside zones. So they have to travel, say, an hour and a half, 2 hours or so per go to work or to get back home.
So
In
you're saying the working class agitation over the increase in the bus fare was exacerbated by the fact that there is a large portion of the population that has to commute a long distance to get to work.
Yeah, indeed, because this is a transport system that's been going on since 2006 or so, in which they like integrated the public transportation using buses and the metro. The metro in Santiago, which is the capital, has always been like the spine of the transport in Chile, and then in Santiago, and then they integrated it with the bus. But the thing is that people just have very shitty lives in that regard. Like the quality of life in Chile, we work like 45 hours weekly, which means that people often start to work at like 8 a.m. or 9 a.m. and they have to drop off kids at school and earlier, and also take into account these like 1 hour and a half trips, which means that you have to get up at like 5 or 6 for the people who live outside places, and then you exit work at 6 7, even later if you work in, I don't know, retail and stuff. So the transport thing, and this is something that is very historical in Chile. And you were saying Chile, right? By the way, no, it's not Chile.
No,
I don't care.
I know it's Chile.
Exactly. I don't care. You say whatever you want, but I
You can call
congratulate
it
you.
America if you really want to. Okay.
No, I call you United States. America is larger than the US. Sorry.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, fucking Latin American person. That's right. Okay.
Exactly.
Counter my
Right.
colonial narrative. Wait.
I know. So the thing is that the transport has always been a touchy issue, and on October 18th, out of nowhere, and this was completely unexpected, a series of high school students start to dodge the fare. They just hopped over the turnstiles, and this sparked this whole thing that's going on. They just started doing it for a few days, and the people just started, supporting them, and it was amazing. People were starting to protest the metro. The turnstiles are for the metro, and everyone just rallied up with the students, and basically they sparked this thing, and then people started complaining about the metro outside the metros, and then that same night of the 18th, and this is also, I think, something that's very important to make an emphasis on. The government, which you characterized correctly, chose to place a state of exception. I don't know if you know what that is.
I do not. Could you elaborate?
Yes, a state of exception is constitutionally established period of time. In this case, it was for a maximum of 2 weeks, in which certain human rights and constitutional rights can be limited or outright not respected, which in the specific case of this specific state of exception, there are many. For example, when there's emergency, like natural emergencies and so on, which have happened in Chile with the earthquake in 2010, they also declare state of exception for this natural emergency. So people, had to respect a curfew and so on and so on. But that was for a natural disaster.
Somebody, really quickly,
yep.
Somebody in chat is saying there were a bunch of metro stations that were destroyed before the state of emergency was declared. Do you know anything about that?
Yeah, that was what sparked this whole thing. But again, the concept of destruction, it's something we can talk about that maybe later, because they were set on fire. But it's very hard to set a metro station on fire. So there's a lot of questioning about who really did it. And our police force has a history too in southern Chile of burning up trucks and shit to fuck up with the native indigenous people in southern Chile. So yeah, there were some damages, but I honestly will question.
I have a couple of quick questions just to establish a setting here.
Yes, please.
What is the general level of economic well-being in Chile? I understand that things have been getting worse, but I mean, when I think of Chile, like, okay, again, speak to me as though I'm an ignorant American. I'm totally not, but let's pretend
it's not that hard. Don't worry.
Yeah. Imagine like so my frame of reference is like really good area to live, like would be like Beverly Hills, which is where I grew up in. And then you have like and I've been to Mexico, and like I've seen that place, and that place varies tremendously depending whether you're in a city or a rural area. And when I see like videos of the protests in Chile, these places look kind of like to me like mid to low tier urban areas in America. Like these areas aren't wealthy, but they're not like cripplingly like third world poor. This isn't a third world nation, right?
Yeah, that's the image that we have managed to success. I think that the elites have managed to successfully export. My wife, for example, teaches Spanish here in everywhere, but here in Australia, and she always tells and can tell that, for example, for Australians, for Americans, and so on, Chile is like a good starting point to arrive to Latin America and to South America, because it usually to them feels exactly the way that you're describing it. Like things work. The metro is one of the top probably 5 in the world. The places which are very middle class, upper class are very much like other places. I have been around the world, and I can tell you, in general, those good areas in Santiago, they seem very, developed. I hate the concept, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's kind of safe. It's not like it's terrible. It's still Latin American, but we have also had this ideological pride in saying, no, no, we're very different than other Latin American countries. Right, actually, a couple of days ago, a, a libertarian piece of shit intellectual said, "Oh no, we're going to be like other Latin American countries," which is like, dude, we are Latin American. What the fuck? But yeah, your perception is correct. However, the actual numbers and the actual
Would you would you say that the wait? Are you still there? Oh, Comrade? Oh no, they got him. Oh shit. Oh shit, they took him out. Oh fuck. The CIA heart attack gun. Wait, he says, "What the fuck? I'm here. The CIA got me." Wait, let me restart the call. Hello? Wait, leave the call and rejoin. I can see your thing lighting up, but you're not coming through at all. Leave the call and rejoin.
Hi?
Ah, there you are. Hello.
What the fuck?
Okay. There you go. All right.
All right.
I had a question. I was
Yes,
about
please.
to ask you right as you cut out.
Yeah.
How much would you say the legacy of Pinochet sort of haunts Chile, like to this day? Like, how much do you think that impacts people's conscientiousness when it comes to?
All right. So just before us answering that question, just to make a quantitative point, the actual median income in Chile is about probably. Let me do the math because I'm working on Australian dollars right now. So just. So the average median income per month in Chile is about $620.
$620?
Yep. You know what median is, right? Or you the people median is basically it's you put everyone from like you pile them from less to from low to high, and you look at the exact 50. The guy that's the person that's at the exact
Yeah,
the medium.
you order
So
everyone from lowest to highest, and then you pick the middle.
that
Right.
yeah
Wow,
exactly.
that's just over $7,000 a year. Jesus Christ.
Yep.
That's like 1/8 the median income in America.
Exactly, but if you look at data like that macroeconomical data, they will tell you that the actual GDP per capita is like 22,000 or so dollars, and that's because the top 5%, 1%, etc. Is it's kind of like the U.S. You know how it is in the U.S. too. All right, so that's to at least tell other people how is someone is asking like how does that money go for in Chile. For example, you probably pay around a third or a half of that in rent, especially in Santiago. So immediately you're and we're talking that the minimum wage is like about half or 2/3 of that, so about $400. So yeah, it's cheap money. It's not enough money to live decently. Yeah, Chile actually, Santiago especially, has been compared to London in terms of living expenses.
How do you believe the protests have been going so far? Have there been any has there been any acquiescence on the part of the government? Has there been any pushback?
No, not at all. you ask me how is the the ghost of Pinochet going on, and I'm doing my PhD actually on how our constitution was made, and our constitution was made in 1980. It was made in the 70s, and enacted, put in effect in the 80s, and it's Pinochet's constitution. And while it has been reformed, it's still basically the same piece of shit. I didn't say that. It's the same document. Basically, it's the structure, the concepts. They're all there, and everything looms over the whole system. Um, After Pinochet returned power in 1990, the center-left government just basically continued the whole neoliberal practices. They did some level of social, distribution of wealth and so on, but it's very minimal. And Chile is very much a privatized country. Everything private. The water is private. Our natural resources have been mostly privatized.
Yeah, aren't you the only developed country on Earth that has privatized water?
I have heard this. I do believe it. Uh, yeah,
That's actually fucking incredible to me.
yeah,
Privatized water.
yeah. It means that basically, if you own a piece of land upstream and you cut off the water, you can fuck off towns and people who are downstream, and which is something that's happened, especially with avocado crops. That's something because they also require lots of water. So there are a lot of small towns in certain areas of Chile which have been fucked over by people. Basically there are like, I don't know, probably like 2,000 or 5,000 families who control all the wealth in Chile too.
That's cool.
And yeah, amazingly, right. Um, well, and you also asked me if how I think if the government is acquiescing. No, I don't think so. They have been very hardlined about what they. This is my perspective on this, of what they understand, what the problem is, and how to solve it. And neither of those are pointing at the core of the issues that the people have been asking. One of which is to make a new constitution.
What specific provisions of the existing constitution do you feel need? So usually successful protests usually have very strong centralized questions and concerns. They don't just express unhappiness. That's what we did with Occupy Wall Street for the most part, and it didn't really
Yeah,
work out.
yeah.
You need to have pointed, like what the Hong Kong protesters are doing. You have like a set list. Is there any such list with the Chilean protesters?
No, and this is, well, there are some elements. I think the answer is yes and no. What I think is wonderful about this protest is that it's very much leaderless. There's a lot of transversal social elements to the protests. It's not just a working class protest. A lot of the middle class, lower middle class, probably some elements of more woke upper middle class are also in there. But it's amazing to see the yes, I am from Chile. Carol Dance de General, for someone asking in the chat.
Valid, valid.
Thank you. And the thing is that it's leaderless, which, yeah, it can be good and bad. And so far, this has meant that people have not backed down. And but some of the elements of these protests are basically pension, which is also completely privatized. You are forced to give money to a private company, which will do whatever they want with that money, and you basically have no access to that money until you retire. And then they set out the terms of um, um, how they give it to you. So there's pension, there's health, there's a large amount of population actually uses a public fund health system. However, most of the it's very bad. It's very shitty, and especially middle class people use the privatized system, which works if you have money. In Chile, basically, if you have money, everything kind of works. But if you don't, you're kind of fucked. And 80% of people just don't have money. That's just the reality of it. There's that.
What do you think the odds are of this ending well?
I think I go in waves of. To me, this is very hopeful that people are not backing down. I thought that it could have died down the first days. I was very desperate to, because of that. But they have shown that they just won't back down. And I think that for everything that the executive has done, the president, the ministries, and so on have done, they have shown that they are not backing down, which shows that even though there's not a completely set list of demands, like a written list, uh, the demands are kind of clear in that regard. They also, for example, some of the things people have asked for is better salaries, of course, like a higher minimum wage. And just to give you an example of how the government is, the president and the executive is considering this, they said, okay, we're gonna put in, instead of 500,000 pesos, sorry, 300,000 pesos minimum wage, which is actually what's going on. We're gonna move it to 500,000 pesos, so a big increase. But what's the government is gonna subsidize that difference. It's not an actual bump in the minimum wage by law, but rather they're gonna subsidize that. Like, and this is something that was done in 18th century England under Queen Elizabeth, and it just didn't work. So they're doing things that are completely stupid, which any economist or any sociologist will tell you that that's not the point, because it's going to lead to a lot of perverse incentives, like economists
Well,
say.
I mean, not that they give a single shit whether or not there are
No,
perverse
no,
incentives.
of course not.
So how
Yeah,
much? So I assume. I mean, you watch me. You're probably a leftist, right?
yeah.
Yeah. How much of the what would you say the split is in terms of the popular sentiment in these protests? Would you say they're largely liberal and fighting against like an evident failure of the system, or is there a strong leftist sect of the protest that's fighting back against with the hope of substantially challenging neoliberalism?
I think the core of this, and this is something that I think is important to talk about, and I think it's also what sets some difference of what is going on here than other places, which is that I do not see the hammer and the sickle as banners of this revolution. However, the values that are underpinning it, I think, are indeed leftist. And I think they come from the history of 28th century leftism, especially communism and socialism in Chile, which is just a very strong, unlike the US, obviously, we had a communist and socialist government. We
For how
had
long it lasted, yeah.
well, yeah, but still, we have a long tradition of socialism.
Yeah, but
Um,
then you had a short and extremely painful tradition of socialists falling out of helicopters. So I can understand if the sentiment
yeah,
has been buried somewhat.
yeah, obviously, especially with the generation that's like from my parents. There is a tradition of anarcho syndicate. There's a lot of traditions. Everything from leftism you can find in Latin America. But the older generations, I think, are very afraid of what may be going on. There's also a very strong anti-Marxist sentiment in a lot
Yeah,
of people
yeah.
who are, especially center and right wing, because of what happened in the 1970, 73, which led to the coup and all of that. But I think the core of the issue is the question of dignity and equality and justice, which I think are very much core socialist and communist and leftist values in the end.
What do you think? What do you think people here in the states can do? Like, obviously, we can't do much, but in terms of getting the word out, spreading popular rhetoric, are there any particular propaganda points that reactionaries are trying to use against the protesters? Is there any particular language or rhetoric or messaging we could use to get people on board with the idea that this is an ethical protest being done for good reasons? What, in your opinion, what do you think can be done?
Well, the thing is that the media, the traditional media, and which is the media that gets exported to, for example, here Australia or the US or whatever, they're just focusing on the vandalism, on the material destruction, Only little bits are focusing on the actual human rights abuses and torturing, and we have attained the highest amount of people with eye injuries or loss of sight or things like that in for being 25 or so days in protest.
Yeah, I mean,
So I think
I saw the military piling up the corpses of protesters. I believe I saw that video. Yeah, your armed forces sure are going hard keeping you people in line.
yeah, I think that's also sadly a history of our police being more in line with the armed forces than being a civilian police in in this context. That's the police have always been a tool for the elite. This is from 19th century at least, and we had in 28th century there's been many examples of the police force being used to gun down workers' protests. There's a famous one from 1905, if I am not mistaken, in northern Chile, in which there was a syndicate, a union protest in I think it was a school, could have been a factory, that kind of goal, and the police just went in there, shut everyone down. It's basically the same thing that's going on right now. Though now they're just using tear gas and shooting these rubber balls with iron and so on and so on. So I think one of the things that outside people, the foreigners, can do is make this visible. I think my desperation is because I see that there's yet not enough political pressure from outside for the government. I think one of the most unrecognized elements that shifted political issues during our dictatorship was that the political pressure from international pressure changed things within. It forced Pinochet and the military junta to change things. So I think the number one thing will be to make this visible, make these human rights violations. There has been systematic use of violence and rights abuse in the police force in Santiago, in Chile, in all the places that there's been protests and so on. I think that's if I consider a message, I think that's 1907. Someone tells me that this attack was, so 100 years of the police force murdering people for the elite, and I think also that's something that we as leftists we need to start to make popular, eat the rich and all of that, and because otherwise they're gonna just kill us until we shut down.
Do you one thing that's so normally when I think of like what do we do to talk about this subject, I usually frame it around debunking talking points from the opposition. But I haven't actually seen, and this is probably a product of the spaces that I move in, I haven't actually seen any propaganda demonizing the Chilean protests in Western media. I haven't seen any big figures talking about how all of you are actually Antifa cheapskates trying to steal money from the government. I haven't seen any big YouTube videos that got super popular calling all of you like a bunch of like communist revolutionaries who are trying to seize the state to build gulags or whatever. All the typical propaganda. I haven't seen it. Now, that's probably, again, because I mostly move in left-leaning circles. I'm sure there is quite a bit of propaganda out there. That's what I'm curious about. What are the counterfactuals? What are people saying about you guys that needs to be debunked?
Basically, they just focus on the material destruction or the protest as okay, fine. This people protesting and some are misbehaving and the police is using force to quiet them down and all of that. But I think there hasn't been a proper visibilization. It hasn't been made enough. Um, the point hasn't been struck about the level of human rights violations that have been done by the government and the fact that they're not listening, they're not acting like a government, and they're not governing. And I think so far, this they're getting away with violating human rights, and this is fucking 21st century. To me, it's dementia how they can get away with this, and the consequence I see is that there is no external political pressure. Um, I just don't see it, and this is what I see in the news here in Australia. Australians tell me, "Oh yeah, I hear that there's some protest and whatever." So I don't think they're playing it down. I think that's my point. They're playing everything down, and this is protests. These are protests that have been going on, and they have been filling the streets. They have been. I don't know how common this is.
I mean, this is a pretty significant protest. I mean, this is this
Yeah,
isn't
it is.
some weak shit. I mean, this is pretty heavy. The cities are being like shut down how with how many protesters there are. Are there any people within the government that are sympathetic towards the will of the protesters? Is there, for example, like a left leaning or like left liberal party that has some legislative power, something like that? You know?
Um, okay, if I have to give a yes no, the answer will be no. Because the government is right now is very much it used to be neoliberal or liberal rights, but these actions have demonstrated that they like when push comes to shove, they have been showing that they are using the same resources and the same tactics that the dictatorship used. So they basically just went full authoritarian. Um, some say that maybe a minister like I think it's the interior ministry or state minister is trying to play things a bit cooler with the president, but the president is, I don't know, he's like an egomaniac, like much like Trump, and I think he's
What's the name of
absolutely
your
out of
president?
Sebastián Piñera. He also was
Go
a
go
big.
go spell check. There we go.
Oh yeah, yeah,
All right.
yeah. Thank Google for that.
Sebastián Panera Chile has corrected itself into
No, it's Piñera.
hey, he's 69 years old. Nice. Holy shit.
Who
Your
will fuck that?
Your president is worth $2.8 billion?
Yep.
And he went to Harvard. Oh, damn. God, you can't get
Yep.
more neoliberal than that.
Indeed. Yep.
Jesus.
I think that's very good. Show. It's a show and tell. It just tells you everything about his politics and so on. So no, I don't. So far, no one in the government has demonstrated any empathy with the actual concerns that the protests are
That
asking
fucking
for.
sucks.
They're not. They're not gonna reform. They're not gonna do the structural state reforms that are needed. The constitution basically empowers them to privatize everything. They are trying not to give away that privilege. My wife, which is much more hardliner leftist than I am, and much more intelligent and paranoid, as usually is the case,
Yeah.
she says that they're just downright evil in that they know what the fuck is going on, but they just don't wanna. They don't want to give in any privilege. They just no.
So,
And
from what I'm reading right here, in regards to that aforementioned sympathy in the government, and hey, I mean, no, I probably agree with your wife in this respect. Like, no credence given to the interest of neoliberal governments trying to ensure dignity for their people. So I'm reading an article now. Chilean NGOs Popular Defense Vergara Toledo Bros Defense Committee and Legal Cooperative filed Monday a lawsuit for crimes against humanity against President Sebastián Piñera so that Santiago's Seventh Guarantee Court investigate his political responsibility for human rights violations which have taken place over the last 2 weeks amid massive unrest in the country. This seems
noise.
pretty big. What do you think the odds are of this actually pushing through? Is there much accountability for your government?
Hard to say. The judiciary during the dictatorship basically did nothing. I don't have that much faith because, again, justice is mostly it works for the elite, and also, or either way, the elite usually gets away with shit. The son, for example, this, I think to me this makes it very clear. The son of a politician a couple of years ago was drunk driving and killed, a working class man, uh, and basically never had to set a foot in jail. The corpse, the in the morgue, the medical service basically said no, no, we can't say anything. The reports were doctor basically, and now a couple of weeks ago I heard that this the son of this politician was going to work in the Ministry of Education. So that's the level of accountability that the elite has. I hope that this changes with this. I am desperate for these politicians to, especially for those who work for the state right now, for them to be accountable for the human rights violations. Like, there has been abuses, there has been tortures, there's been illegal detention, sorry, and all of that, and yet no ministers have, presented they haven't resigned, which to me is a clear backing up of what the government is doing, basically. So everyone
Yeah.
is closing ranks with
I,
what's going on.
so I'm really curious to see how this goes because I think this is a very unique type of protest. Usually these
I think so
protests
too. Yeah.
Yeah, usually these are either socialist revolutions in the making, whether they succeed or not, or they're protests against an overtly authoritarian government. And Chile does, of course, have like elections and stuff. It's not authoritarian in the same way like the Arab Spring nations were. So there's obviously a difference there. I'm looking right now at the 2017 Chilean general election, and I'm quite surprised by a lot of what I'm seeing. So I'm sure, obviously, you know this, but your current president, apparently, after unveiling his cabinet in 2018, revealed that his interior minister, Andre Shadwick, was a vocal
Uh
supporter of Pinochet, which is pretty cool. That's a good meme. Also,
huh.
but on the plus side, it seems like
I can up you on that.
yeah.
During the 80s, this Chadwick fella, he actually used to, he was a rat in the university, and he, how do you say it when tell people, when you denounce people to, the fascist government?
Uh, like when you rat them out.
Yeah, exactly. He used to rat people out during his, he was, I can't recall if he was just the students' union president, or the, I don't know, something in the universities, and he did a lot of writing up for the. So he's involved. His hands are not.
Excuse me.
He obviously probably didn't torture anyone, but he's fucking involved in everything. So yeah, he is a supporter, and he is also, by the way, the cousin of the president.
Nice. What a disgusting piece of shit. Um, it looks like in the 2017 Chilean presidential election, so obviously you guys don't get another round until 2021, which is a long time
Yeah,
away. But it seems like, if nothing else, um, Alejandro Guillier, near,
Guillermo.
yeah, Guillier came decently close. Like, in terms of the
Yeah.
popular vote, it was 54.5% to Sebastian and 45.4% to Alejandro, which suggests to me, and this I think I think maybe where the best hope lies. It seems like even if these protests don't get what they want, it's unlikely Piñera is going to be elected in again for another term. Maybe radical change can happen after the next round of elections.
Okay, so let me explain this for the people too. The elections in Chile, since we started having elections again in 1990, they have been going on pretty much like that, as in, like 48, 52%, and so on in second round votings. But this Alejandro Guiller guy, he's from a center left, quote left, coalition that has been also part of the problem. So I am unsure, and right now they also have not shown up too much strength or determination or hearing the people and so on. So I'm not sure that um, this coalition has. I don't think so. They are just basically reproducers of the neoliberal system, because I think a lot of them are something we call in Chile the izquierda, which is basically the whiskey left. So basically, old school leftist guys who, some of them who fought against Pinochet, some of them were exiled and then returned, but they became kind of settled in this neoliberal system. And just to make the example, one of our past presidents, President Lagos,
Okay.
he used to be like a hardcore anti-Pinochet guy who went on to TV in the 80s when it was very, very risky to do that. Um, he could have gotten shot or disappeared or whatever, and he confronted Pinochet directly in TV, and he was very inspiring. But then in the 2000s, when he was president, he basically leased everything. He made a lots of decisions that ended up privatizing streets, highways, and so on.
What the fuck? Why? Class
Uh,
traitor, why?
yeah, because since we have had this huge history of socialism and so on, they just became this thing called renewed socialists, or the renewed left. And now I think more the younger generations have been showing more. I think they show more hardcore leftist ideals, more direct criticisms to the capitalist system. And so on. So I place more faith maybe in them than in this old center left coalition. So I don't think that if we would have gotten a different president, like between Alejandro Guiller or Sebastián Piñera, it would have been that different. Because, for example, the price increase in it, which sparked this, was it was a technical decision, obviously political, but also technical, and these are regular increases. So everyone agrees on this, like everyone who has real access to power. So no, I don't think that necessarily changing the government to this other center left coalition can give us the structural reforms that we need. Also, what I was gonna say, oh yeah, shit, sorry, it's the
No worries.
yeah.
You've been pumping it out pretty hard. If you need a
No, it's
brief
all right.
answer.
I used to teach at the university and I love it, so it's all right.
Wait, out of curiosity, what's your current profession? You said you're getting
uh,
your PhD.
Yeah, I'm getting a PhD in sociology. I'm a sociologist by profession. I
Nice. Hey,
studied
me too,
sociology.
kind of.
Yeah, that's why I started following you, because respect. And I'm doing this PhD on how our current constitution was made in the 70s, basically from a sociology of knowledge perspective. On
Are you?
we have the sorry, yeah.
No, my comrade. So are you're in agreement with me that if sociology was been given more credence, we could unquestionably, like, substantially improve general elections and, like, the quality of government, right? That sociology is a widely, vastly underappreciated field that needs to be respected more.
Yeah, absolutely. That it's been something I've been trying to advocate right now on Twitter and things like that. And just to answer something in the chat, I got here in 2018. This is my second year here in Australia, using a government scholarship, which I hope that doesn't get cut off due to these things that been going on. So
Can
it's not
only
like
hope.
it's not like I bail from Chile. I would love to be there, even if I don't know. So yeah, I think sociology has been, especially in Chile, in Chile, and other social sciences like anthropology and so on. Um, they have been a little bit too technified, but also, and this is something that's very close to us. Sociology was forbidden during the dictatorship. The sociology majors in universities, they were closed down, and it was forbidden to engage in sociology. So there's like a generational gap in there too.
Bolsonaro has been pushing in that direction as well.
Yeah, I saw when getting into universities and things like that, and it shows you how important universities are in some way. Obviously, they're not everything, but they are important intellectual places.
Yeah.
So
Well, there's
yeah,
a
I
reason why
think
every far right government immediately goes after the intellectuals. Like there is a reason
indeed.
why that happens.
Yeah, intellectual is also one of my topics, so would love to chat about that too.
Yeah.
Um,
After really quickly,
yeah.
after we're done speaking about this, or after we've spoken about this a bit more, I think, or when you feel comfortable concluding, I was going to bring on Twapi, who is I think was, now that the campaign is completed, but he was a foreign policy advisor, and we're going to discuss this from a more Western-centric, like tactical approach. Would you be interested in participating in that discussion, or do you have stuff you'd like to move on to?
No, no, no. I would love to. I'm just happy to talk about things.
Gotcha. With that being said, oh, the video finished. With that being said, would you be interested in me bringing him on now?
Yeah, sure.
Here, let me see if he's here. 1 second. Twapi. How's your day going?
Woke up pretty early, but it's fine.
Gotcha.
I'm in the future here, or rather, you're in
Yes.
the past. So it's like 9 a.m.
Oh, by the way, do you want to like shout? Is there any like social media that you would like to shout out? Hello? Hello?
Sorry, I put in the chat. I forgot to press the button. So
Gotcha.
it's the morning. My name is Mauricio Kilpatay. Mauricio is my name, and @Kilpatay is my Twitter handle. It's just my last name.
Gotcha. Because we're going to do a group call, I'm going to switch to the Discord server really quickly. You're on my Discord server, correct?
Yeah, yes.
Okay, join. I'm going to end this call. Join the Stream Collins channel so I can pull you in. Okay.
Okay.
Peace. I feel like a talk show host or something. Jesus. Hello.
Hey, how's it going?
I'm doing wonderfully. Uh-oh, the other guy left. I'll bring him back 1 second. How you doing, man?
I'm doing pretty good, man. Man, life's been really good recently. It's been excellent.
Yeah, I've seen a cavalcade of success on your Twitter, if nothing else.
Yeah, everything's good. We just won the mayoral election. I got a second job as a foreign policy advisor to another congressional candidate. Everything's just going wonderful, man.
Fuck yes, absolutely. Kilpate, are you here? Can you hear?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Amazing.
Beautiful.
Amazing.
Amazing. My friends, hello. What the fuck do we do? Okay, we've got
hi Tupi. Sorry.
Oh, hello. Nice to meet you, man.
Nice to meet you too.
We've got the three greatest minds: a PhD Chilean national studying sociology, a foreign policy advisor, and a YouTuber. We're ready. This is
Come on.
we've got everyone we need.
Brilliant,
Thank
man.
you.
This is a real collection of the new modern, like, this is the new enlightenment right here. We're starting it today.
Oh, unquestionably. And thank you, by the way. I think only those words could have really described the gravitas of what we're doing here. Twapi, I wanna open up with you. How much of the conversation that we just had did you hear? No shame if you had to leave the period or whatever.
A good amount of it. The other half was Outer Worlds.
I respect that. What are your immediate opinions? How are you feeling?
I feel very hopeful about the Chilean protests. I feel very hopeful about a lot of protests going around in the world. The only one I would say I feel not so hopeful about would be the one in Hong Kong, which of course is like going against an immovable force. But
Yeah, China.
I think
there's no external force that can keep China from doing whatever they want. Like
exactly, that's the main thing. There's no real like counterweight except for like bad PR. But at the end of the day, they're the people with like people in concentration camps. So I mean, like, they don't really care about it at the end of the day. But here, What started to remind me a lot, the general strike, a lot of the different strikes has been on the ground in Chile and like evasion tactics. It reminded me of a lot of what happened in Sudan. On immediately there was violence and like hardcore government crackdown. But as like all the cameras kind of like turned to them and they realized like, oh, we can't actually push this back, and then the general strike happened, they had to slowly cave. And after one demand was met, another demand was met, and another demand was met. Now, the
Right.
difference here, of course, being that this is Chile, there's not as many cameras on it. The discussion about it's a little different, and it might actually go against U.S. interests in some cases. So it actually makes it a lot more difficult. But I think that the amount of support I've seen on the ground, the amount I've seen of support in international, even if there's not in the discussions I've had behind closed doors, most people in American foreign policy are actually against the Chilean protests. Um, but I think I'm very hopeful. I'm very hopeful. I think I don't see any budging from the protesters. I've only seen a really huge backlash from the government, but then slow caves.
All right. With that being said, Kilpate, do you agree generally with that characterization?
I love to hear that Tupi thinks that. To me, the first few days in the Chile protest was like, oh fuck, and then I saw what was going on in the Lebanon, especially, and seeing all the people in the streets and in Barcelona and everywhere, and that I think that sentiment of the neoliberal capitalist system just failing to provide for people, I think that's the general sentiment. And we'll see whether leftism can use that and mobilize that, and whether or not that will mean something. And I agree, Hong Kong seems amazing, but it's China, and I don't know. But yeah, I agree with Tupi. He's much more knowledgeable than myself about the external international situation, and it's nice to see that.
Gotcha. I just, oh man, I get okay. Listen, because I'm more Amerifat than both you. I mean, like literally. Okay, I've seen Dylan's cut jawline, and you're obviously not American, Copenhagen. But I feel like there's such a burnout right now when it comes to paying attention to foreign. I haven't even talked about Haiti on my channel. Hong Kong has been huge and taken up an enormous amount of media space. You've Chile going on right now. We're still off the cuff on Venezuela. Now we've got fucking Bolivia. Like,
Yeah.
there's so much shit is happening. And that's not even the whole of it. And it's so difficult to partition one's interest appropriately. But I feel like the Chilean protests are genuinely special. I want to help.
Oh, yeah.
In whatever way I can, but I don't. It seems like the odds of success here they're not like non-existent. It just feels like the immediate goals are a little bit more difficult to pursue than they are in other instances. If that makes any sense, my lack of foreign policy understanding might be coming through here.
I would say that when you set these goals out, they're like posts in the distance. And I hate to quote Donald Trump in the art of the deal, but you never just like ask for something and then like the government gives it to you. It goes through like a very long process of pushing back and forth, back and forth. One of the best arguments, even if you aren't in support of Medicare for all, you should support Medicare for all presidents, because most likely if their theory of like, they can't get it through the Senate like goes on and they've got legitimate arguments there, you'll get something maybe like halfway or like a half measure, like 80% of the way there.
Yeah, you should always go as far left as you can. This is one of the things I disagree with so strongly on Destiny. He thinks like moderation in policy works. It doesn't. I don't know what he's thinking. The Republican Party hasn't been practicing it for decades.
Obama's like public option thing is a great example of what happens when you just show your hand at the beginning and then like the other side will just take advantage of that immediately.
Yeah, when your opening hand is a Heritage Foundation plan and you get moved to the right from that, the feels.
Yeah, it's not the best. So when you put that in the context of the Chilean movement, I mean, they want to change the subsidy system. They want to make the privatized water system like public. They want to change the constitution. Those are posts that this government under no circumstance is going to cave in on unless it literally like meant the collapse of Chile, right? Because this is a right-wing government. This is a billionaire leader. It'd be like if we tried to get like Medicare for all from Michael Bloomberg. It's not going to happen, right? Yeah. So we need to understand it in that context. But
And
the
also, to be sorry, and also, I would like to add the we need to have a historical understanding also. Like the dictatorship in Chile tells you a story. There's a whole story during the 28th century of authoritarianism. We had a couple of coups besides the 73 one in Chile, and that also configures both what the kind of government and the kind of state that's been built. And in our case, it's a very authoritarian. It's a very vertical system, and also the fact that Chilean civil society basically started living 10 years ago once again. So to me, this is also what's been amazing from our revolution. Well, I don't know if it's a revolution, but uprising or whatever, is that it's they've been calling the awakening, or the, I don't know how to translate it correctly, but Chile is awake, right? Like from sleeping from this slumber created by the dictatorship, by the constitution, by this neoliberal system, and that we have been sucking up, the elites. Candy coated dick, and it seems that we have liked it, but really we haven't, and we just realized that it's been basically getting fucked up over. But just to make the point, we need to historicize these socio-political relations. There's a tradition, there is a push, there is I don't know, all those things. I just to say that we need to take that into account when doing this political analysis too.
I'm very glad you said that, because if you analyze just about every like uprising that's going on in the world right now, they can all, except for the Bolivian one, which is a coup.
It's weird, yeah.
I read the OAS report. I can tell you, even according to the OAS report, this would actually be a coup. But back to this. Basically every uprising on the ground that's happening is due to that historical context you're talking about. Like when we look at the buildup over time, when we talk about the extradition agreement in Hong Kong, that was a straw that broke the camel's back. If it was just that, this wouldn't have happened. When we looked at Sudan, it was this dictator trying to say, well, I'm going to keep ruling past this point, even though everybody thought this was going to be the end of my rule. That was the straw that broke the camel's back. In this, it was the fare hikes, and that was the straw that broke the camel's back. It's never just one thing. When you see like an article that's like, "Oh, Chile revolts over fare hikes," it's never that simple. You need to look at the historical context, which, from an American standpoint, is very hard to do.
And I think that's the part of the, like, Bosch's question, is that part of the thing we can do is to make this historical. I think for example, it's the same exact thing in my view with gender issues. Sure, maybe feminism saying that, hey, men can't make any decisions about abortions and so on sounds rough, but there's a 10,000 Western civilization history of us men making decisions for women. So it makes sense if you put it in the context, and it helps understanding. And I think that, again, throwing the ball back to Bosch and so on, is that there is my sociological perspective is that there is a huge historical perspective of things from the American audience. Like, they are very bad at thinking historically. What do you think about that, Bosch?
Yeah, I mean, it's really easy to look back in retrospect and say that sometimes things were done with like or they went too far, they were hyperbolic. But at the end of the day, there are probably 1,000 failed attempts at making the world a better place that no one ever heard about because they adhered too hard to the the faculties of decency and civility, of being moderate, of kowtowing when necessary, of playing tactically. I personally like the indignity and suffering caused by any injustice worth throwing a revolt of this scale over is probably worth whatever damages are done in the revolution it prompts. I'm in favor of aggrandizing this to the extent that it's not capable of being ignored. Which I guess is why it's such a shame that it's getting so little media coverage, at least in America. Has Trump even made a statement on Chile?
I can actually comment on this since I work with a lot of these people on occasion. These people really, some of them who run in my circles and believe in like what I believe in, they're like really for these Chilean protests. But these people in power, including like some government officials that the majority of Americans would call left wing. I can't comment, but they kind of look down on these protesters. They really see them as
Makes
a
sense.
threat to U.S. interests. They see them as going like kind of like, oh, these are part of the people that we kind of work to overthrow. We don't really need this at the moment. This is a challenge to our power in South America. We're dealing with something in Brazil now. We finally resolved Bolivia, and now we got to deal with this. We got to deal with these, and I've heard a few of them literally just call them uppity.
Sorry, Tubi. It's like we got a deal. You know the level of entitlement that these U.S. interests have. It's like fuck you, right?
I request to keep my job.
Yeah, well, yeah, of
It's
course.
all right. It's all
yeah,
right.
yeah, Tweppy being
That's my anti-colonialism. Sorry.
Hey, no, man, I openly call myself anti-imperialist, anti-colonialist. A lot of people hate it, but man, I just work harder than them, so that's why I'm there, and they're below me, man.
Yeah, no, I understand. It's not a criticism on you in any by any means.
what do you guys think? What do you think people can do here in the United States to meaningfully affect this discourse? Are there any? This sounds so stupid, but are there any people we could contact? Are there any politicians who have expressed sympathies? Are there any Twitter hashtags? What can be done?
Bernie did at least one tweet.
He did?
And he
Okay.
expressed some. Yeah. I think I saw it. So there's that.
Gotcha.
I would say like really the biggest problem when it comes to foreign policy in America and when it comes to dealing with things like that is nobody knows that this is going on. The consequences of our foreign policy decisions don't really touch Americans directly in the way it touches indirectly with our infrastructure, with our lack of like spending in environmental solutions, the environmental impact of empire, which is not often talked about, not to like move into any eco-fascist stuff. But if we were to somehow translate that to Americans, because like the furthest back we could go back to like something attacking America is like what, Pearl Harbor. We don't know the consequences of bombing, where you can go into like if you went to like Russia or if you went to like Eastern Europe, you can still like see bullet holes within the infrastructure from like World War II or civil wars that kind of like went through the region at the time. You go to America, that's like a distant memory.
Is there any country on Earth that has tasted conflict on its borders less than America over the past 150 years? Any at all?
I mean, like, I don't know, Iceland?
Yeah, I guess like Iceland, Australia, maybe?
Hey, man, those emus destroyed them.
That's true. They got fucking rocked by those.
That's horrible, man.
By those neck
And they're right.
birds.
Hey, that's a real tragedy. We can't mock that, Fosh. That's insensitive.
Yeah, I'm sorry. UK? No, UK got bombed to shit during World War II.
Yeah.
No, it's just really weird because that is like a wild perspective shift, you know?
So this is a really important point I want to make. So you understand that, and everybody in this room understand that, and everybody like watching this understands the consequences of that bombing to an extent, but we never really can. No American really can understand that. And then you give those people who don't understand the consequences of those bombings and that offensive the biggest empire in history and tell them to go ham with no like checks on power, with a president that almost has complete authority over our armed forces. And then you elect someone like George Bush, Donald Trump, with Dick Cheney at the helm. What do we expect to happen? It is of an extreme importance. The number one like job of anybody in America that's working on foreign policy is to inform and help people know about the consequences of our empire, because our bombs touch every single corner of the planet. Our empire touches every single corner of the planet. The consequences of our votes affect those people. So they can't vote in elections, but we can. So we have a responsibility to inform people and to vote.
And also the economic interests. Well, there's the oil, in Middle East. I know nothing about that. But part of the issues here in Chile, it's the privatization of the natural resources, such as copper, such as lithium, which is going to be super important. And like most of the lithium in the world is mined, as far as I know, here in Bolivia and in Chile. And there's a lot of economic interest too in international capital and so on. And for example, there's a thing with the TPP, the Trans-Pacific whatever treaty, which also is in the end, it's about not just the boats, not just the bombs, not just the state, but the interrelationship between how the U.S. state works for these economic powerhouses, and vice versa. So I think there's that too, which is what, in the end, it's like a two-pronged attack, which we can't ignore in any case, and
Yeah,
that's global capitalism and so on.
yeah. The military is used to enforce a state of colonialism abroad. I mean, a lot of people think it stays in the past. It really isn't. You can look at nations like Zimbabwe. You can obviously call the Israel-Palestine situation colonialism. We right now have U.S. troops in Syria whose only goal is to protect oil. That's it, and it's been directly declared by the president that the only reason that we're there now is to protect oil. The military is being used at this moment as a mercenary force, which is not only an insult to the world, but is an insult to the troops that are honestly brave and honestly thought they were getting in to help defend freedom. But then our president uses them as a slot machine.
All right, Mr. Fucking election campaign 15 years from now. It all gets summed up by the quote, right? I don't even remember the quote. It's something along the lines of the Western world has always presumed its superiority on the basis of them having produced and exported better ideas, but the rest of the world knew it was always superiority in the development and application of systematized violence. Sometimes Americans forget this. The rest of the world never does. It's something like that, right? But I probably butchered that horribly, but the sentiment is nonetheless the same. What's interesting to me is that, at least for the first time in my recent memory, all of this is taking place in not just but in extremely neoliberal society in Chile. So I think this is almost a testing ground with which we can, not to trivialize what's going on over there, but it is interesting, I think, to see a real uprise of consequence against the outreach of neoliberal policy in a way that can't be meaningfully conflated as either a revolt against authoritarianism or like a socialist revolution. I think this is a more how do you say, concentrated, free of conflating factors. I'm very interested to see how it plays out and how it's received in a historical sense. How people will be talking about this 2 or 3 years down the line.
I tend to agree. I mean, that's one of the main, like you talked about earlier, how you haven't really seen a lot of stuff in the news media about Chile and horrible communist revolt about to overthrow and kill grandmas or whatever. It's because they can't. There's not really a lot of material. What are they going to say? Well, the horrible protesters, which 15 of them have been killed by government forces. Well, they're protesting for the social services against a billionaire president. It's just not good narrative. It's just really bad.
But you can still spin it, and I think that to me that's been amazing to see that. Chile again has a long history of anti-communism, at least from the 40s. We had concentration camps against communists in the 40s, which General Pinochet also directed at some point. The coup was obviously inspired directly by the anti-Marxist sentiments. One of the things I am analyzing in our constitution as well, and it's something that is still looming, and that's still underpinning the discourse, the narrative that is used to talk about this thing. For example, President Piñera, the first day when he announced the state of exception and he installed a curfew and people couldn't move, couldn't gather and so on, he said, "We are at war with a very organized enemy." And the sentiment and the how to say it, the concept that the right wing still uses, it's still the specter of Marxism, the specter of communism. Even if it's, and that's something that is very interesting, even if it's the hammer and sickle flag has not been seen so much in these protests. Obviously, there's a lot of communist people, the Young Communist Party, etc., etc. It's still something that the right wing uses and weaponizes against these protests. So they're saying, no, these are organized. by nasty international communist Marxist groups. So the right wing, and thus what the media exports, because that's in Chile we have a right wing controlled media. That's the export that they get outside. So I disagree in this too, in that the narrative being spinned is against communism and Marxism, even if it's not there in the practice.
Is your really quickly, is your media generally state controlled or is it privately operated?
No, there's no state. Even the government TV channel is it has the logo of the government, but it's basically privately funded, so everything is privatized.
Fuck? Okay, all right, just checking.
What do you want me to say?
I just like, all right, okay, yeah,
yeah, and it's all controlled by a few families.
It's funny because I've heard that one of the only like genuinely decent professions you guys have, not even a profession really, but your firefighters are all volunteer, and apparently they're very highly respected.
They are the only one. They're the only institution that's still respected highly, and I think that is because they are shielded from the capital, and I think from the touch of capitalism and capital, and that kind of orientation.
Yeah, I wouldn't want any like fucking Nero shit, show up at your house when it's on fire and start negotiating a price.
Exactly.
Twubby, what
and the thing.
Oh, sorry.
I don't know. I just want to say that just the firemen are also kind of. I have seen that they refuse to be like state controlled because their wages will be shared and so on. So that just tells you how the public system is in Chile.
Gotcha. Twubby?
Yes.
No, you were going to say something, and then I interrupted by asking.
Oh yeah, earlier.
The media was state owned or.
Yeah, I was talking primarily from like an American perspective because like that's how I view the world. Through like how does America view it and how will America affect it? Because we control the biggest empire in history. But when it comes to stuff in like on the ground in Chile, of course they're gonna like try to paint any protester as like a Marxist rioter here to destroy like wonderful like liberalism that has been brought to Chile, and oh it's horrible, and they're gonna bring back the regime and all this other stuff like the regime before Pinochet, and they're gonna bring back evil social. Of course, that's how they're gonna paint it. But from an American perspective, and trust me, like I'm very like adamant about like watching how foreign policy is like shown through like CNN and like MSNBC and like Fox News. There hasn't been a lot of discussion. Like the worst stuff I've seen is some government officials saying that like Maduro wants the Chilean protesters to do what they're doing and revolting, and then Maduro will have a puppet government. It was like some ridiculous stuff.
Oh
and
yeah,
that person got
sorry.
such.
I don't know if you know, but there's a lot of, especially in social media, right-wing people saying that Maduro sends money to the protesters and that Maduro is like paying for sandwiches and drinks and so on for the protesters. And this shows you, again, I'm just going to interrupt you, but there's video images of, like trucks, sorry, not trucks, like small cars handing out, food to protesters. And right-wing people say like, oh, this is Maduro sending money like Chilezuela and so on and whatever. And the protesters are saying like, dude, this is solidarity. Like you see people in the street, you give them food. What the fuck is wrong with you? And I think that's the mindset of the right-wing people versus protesters in this case.
You guys didn't hear Vladimir Lenin set up a trust fund prior to his death that would pay out to the Chilean protesters 100 years later?
Yeah, no, Evo Morales and Maduro both have like shaven and like put on makeup and are actually on the ground actively training guerrilla forces.
You think Castro is dead? Son. Sorry.
Guys, he knows.
By the laws of YouTube video algorithm preferential search treatment, I should probably wrap this up soon. I just want to say that I really appreciate both of you speaking on this because I was largely ignorant of these protests. Is there anything that either of you would like to cap off on? Obviously, Twuppy, in the near future, we need to talk about, at the very least, Haiti and Hong Kong. I'd like to have you on more regularly if possible.
That'd be wonderful.
But
I could be your official foreign policy advisor.
Yeah, I would actually, unironically, really appreciate that. Thank you.
That'd be really dope.
In regards to Chile, in particular, is there anything that you two would like to cap off on?
You can go first.
Thank you. Well, my focus of research is the Constitution. That is very dear to me, and I think structural reform is necessary, and the call for new constitution will not um, answer every problem, but it will be definitely a step towards legitimating the both the social protest and the political response to that. And I think that's a huge issue that we have not talked about enough, which is the issue of the legitimation and what the organizing principles of legitimation is in discourse, in the constitution, in the institutions, in the economic and political system, and so on. And I think that's also one of the things that's been in the discussion right now in Chile. And as a social scientist, I would love also to see more both usage of social scientists in these matters, in the constitution writing, in the process, and so on, but also um, in the actual social scientists coming out, doing public discourse, doing public work. That's why I like and I really do enjoy your content, Posh, because I think even if you say that you don't read and all of that, you do a lot of trying to make concepts understandable, and that's something that's very dear to me. I think that I align with Pierre Bourdieu in saying that we social scientists need to give out weapons and arm the population with concepts so that they can defend themselves from these systems of oppression, and all of that. So that's my goal, to give out weapons, not from the high standing point of, oh, I know this shit, but rather, look, this is what there is, let's use it for justice, for dignity, for equality, and all of that.
I
And the
try to
guillotine
make
too.
not reading fun for everyone, okay? That's my goal.
Exactly.
Thank you, man. And Twappy, what about yourself?
I just think as Americans, we need to realize that while you don't really realize that you have a lot of power over what changes are going to develop in the rest of the world. You may not be in the debate rooms, but your votes matter. And we can see from Bolivia, we can see from Venezuela, we can see from the history with Cuba and banana republics. When it comes to Latin American affairs, definitely ones that involve substantial social change, America is always in that room. Whether it's through like organizations like the OAS, or if it's through direct involvement. So when we look at these movements around the world, we have to be actively involved in lobbying our governments and acting as internationalists when dealing with these issues. So I would ask for everybody to continue to monitor the situation, to continue to advocate for real social change in these countries that you may not feel the direct consequences of this involvement, but being that with them in solidarity, knowing that you are a vital member of that struggle. Even though you're not in the same country on the streets with them, you can show that support through other means, through getting involved and really pushing for real change. So all I can ask for everybody is to get involved, lobby their congressmen, lobby their senators, and really just spread knowledge online. That is the most you can do for this movement.
Fuck yes. Thank you both very much for enlightening my dumb Amerifat brain, choked, as are my arteries, with lard and misinformation. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. Do we get to plug our stuff now?
Absolutely. Plug away.
Okay, you can go first, Mr. Chilean.
I'm Mr. Chile. I am Chile. We are all Chile.
We're all Chile.
No,
On this blessed day.
on this blessed day, on the day of the Lord. No, just my Twitter at Kilpatay. It's been hanging out, and I do have a small website. It's called doctoranding.org that I'm trying to set up, and I have written a few things on this, mainly from the perspective of social sciences and so on, and it's just something I'm trying to do and to help people get a PhD if they want to, but it's in Spanish, so whatever. Fuck Piñera, fuck Carol Dance, and yeah. Thank you, Wash.
Hell yeah. Absolutely. Have a good one.
Thank you.
Awesome. And for me, there's just two things I want to plug. Number one, I'm gonna plug the Red Crescent which is an amazing organization doing work on the ground. In Rojava, they're basically the medics that go to the front lines and help civilians and brave soldiers who have fought in the front lines in Rojava's struggle against the Turkish invasion. If you guys maybe you'll just look them up, drop them a few bucks. Really appreciate it. I know they would appreciate it. They release reports telling you what they actually did with the money. I'm sure everybody in Rojava would really appreciate the solidarity. And to help me, it doesn't seem like a lot, but actually following my Twitter really helps me. It definitely helps you when you do a lot of work in foreign policy and international relation work, and definitely in local politics. So if you could follow my Twitters, I'm now aiming. I'm going to be ballsy. I'm going to try to aim for 2,000 by the end of the year. I'm really upping it up. I'm getting a little egotistical now, but I would really appreciate it if you followed my Twitter. It would really help me out.
I believe in you.
Awesome.
Thank you both very much. I hope both of you have a phenomenal day. We're going to go now to substantially more frivolous topics, okay?
Awesome. Great. Right. And enjoy Blizzard and video games and whatever.
All right, get out of here. Go. Oh, God.